Hey everyone, welcome. Let's just jump right into today's explainer. We're looking at this amazing concept in the Philippines called ang sanggunian, which translates to the intersection. We're going to see just how insanely intertwined our personal faith, social values, and kasayan, or history, really are. Because, we often think of history as just this dry timeline of dates and political stuff. But actually, our historical consciousness is totally woven into our personal identities and how we live our lives every single day.
Okay, so here's our roadmap for today. We're going to look at the evolution of Bayanihan, define historical consciousness, see how faith actually fueled revolutions, explore personal vows and sacred lands, and finally, look at how all this shapes Filipino identity.
Starting off with Section 1, the evolution of Bayanihan, where the past meets the present.
It is so fascinating to compare how we used to handle things versus now. Back in the day, a community would literally lift a bahay kubo, a whole stilt house, onto their shoulders to help a neighbor move. Fast forward to today, and you see everyday folks setting up local community pantries during a crisis, or blasting out rescue boat hashtags on social media in the middle of a massive typhoon. It really makes you wonder, right? What core values are driving both of these actions? How did our ancestors surviving natural disasters actually wire us to react to modern crises? We didn't just inherit our looks from our ancestors, we inherited this whole collective instinct for survival and belief.
Moving on to Section 2, Kamalayang Pangkasaysayan, or our shared history.
So what exactly is Kamalayang Pangkasaysayan? Basically, it's historical consciousness. It's this deep understanding that you aren't just floating around, isolated in the present. You are literally a living link in an unbroken chain stretching all the way from the pre-colonial era, right through Spanish colonization, straight to today. We inherit a collective way of getting through hard times. In the Philippines, Pananampaltaya, faith, and pagpapahalaga, community values, are completely inseparable from history. Think about a local fiesta, or that Bayanihan spirit we just talked about. These aren't just parties or nice gestures. They are the exact moments where spiritual faith and socio-political history completely collide.
To really unpack this, we're going to use something called the Kasayayan lens to look at 3 specific case studies. It's a simple 3-step tool. Step 1, identify the personal faith or belief. Step 2, find the societal or historical conflict. And Step 3, reflect on the intersection. Basically, how do internal beliefs completely flip the script on external societal actions?
All right, Section 3, Faith Fueling Revolutions. We'll be looking at EDSA and the Katipunan.
Just let this sink in for a second. Tanks versus rosaries. We are talking, of course, about the 1986 EDSA People Power Revolution.
Let's run EDSA through our Kasaysayan lens. You had ordinary citizens staring down actual military tanks, but they weren't armed. No way. They were praying the rosary, holding up statues of the Santo Niño, and sharing food in this incredible display of pagkakaisa, or unity. This was way more than just a political rally. It was a massive spiritual and cultural event. Personal faith hit a societal desire for freedom head-on, and that exact collision, it literally altered the entire course of Philippine history.
Now, let's rewind even further to Andres Bonifacio and the Katipunan revolting against Spain. The Katipuneros didn't just borrow European political concepts. They took the religious education that the colonizers forced on them and totally flipped it into a weapon for revolution. Think about the traditional Passion, the suffering, death, and resurrection of Christ. The Katipunan reimagined that entirely. For them, the suffering of Christ became the suffering of Inang Bayan, the motherland, and the resurrection, that symbolized their eventual independence. It is an absolutely brilliant example of harnessing deep internal beliefs to drive real-world historical action.
Which brings us to Section 4, Vows and Sacred Lands, exploring faith and history.
Let's trace the story of the Feast of the Black Nazarene. Way back in 1606, a wooden statue of Jesus Christ arrived in the Philippines from Mexico via the galleon trade, and over the centuries, devotion to this statue just skyrocketed. Fast forward to today, and every single year, millions, literally millions of barefooted devotees risk getting seriously hurt during the treslasyon just to touch it, all to fulfill a panata, a personal vow. Putting our analytical lens back on, we gotta ask, why does a wooden statue from the 1600s have such a powerful grip on someone's hope today? It's because historical suffering beautifully and sometimes really painfully mirrors their own personal vows and modern resilience.
We see a completely different type of intersection when we look at indigenous beliefs clashing with modern development. Take the Cordera people's fight for their ancestral lands, like the historic Chico River Dam struggle led by Maklinin Dulag. On one hand, you have a modern government perspective that looks at a river and sees energy, infrastructure, and progress. But on the flip side, the indigenous community looks at those exact same mountains and rivers and sees sacred history, a place where their ancestors literally live. These differing beliefs drastically change how two groups define what is good for the future. It's a real-time, high-stakes clash of historical consciousness.
And that leads us into our final section, Section 5, Shaping Filipino Identity and Tracing Our Traditions.
Think about the everyday stuff we do. Performing pagmamano with your elders, praying novenas, respecting tribal leaders, or even just going all out for a local fiesta. I want you to think of a value or a religious tradition you practice in your own home right now. Got one? Okay, now trace it backwards. What historical realities did your family or your ancestors have to endure to make that specific tradition necessary? Once you realize that the way you practice your culture today is a direct echo of how our ancestors survived their historical challenges, well, that's when you truly grasp what Kamaliang Pangkasaysayan is all about.
So I want to leave you with one final, pretty profound question to chew on. Does our history make us more faithful, or does our faith change how we make history? As we've seen with Bayanihan, the EDSA revolution, the Katipunan, and the defense of sacred lands, the internal and the external are constantly feeding off each other. I really encourage you to reflect on this and think about how your own cultural background and lived experiences deeply shape your perspective on the past. Thanks so much for hanging out with me for this explainer today. I really hope this gives you a brand new lens to view your history and ultimately your identity.